Welcome to the Opportunity Crudes Management Seminars, or OCMS series. Initially launched in mid-July 2017, the OCMS series is designed to identify common problems and solutions in processing price-advantaged crudes or opportunity crudes, and conventional oil. The topics range from crude contaminants, compatibility, fouling and corrosion, shale tight oil challenges, and latest bottom-of-the-barrel technologies. We have generated a lot of interest among people working in refineries, exploration and production, and midstream business. Based on strong encouraging feedback, we introduce an updated version called OCMS-FOCUS that targets specific individual issues, such as is your desalter ready for opportunity crudes, in May 2019. The upcoming webinar in July 2020 will address impacts of hurricanes on oil production and subsequent refining operations. Crude quality. Hurricanes wreak havoc for producers and refiners. Disclaimers. The threat of a hurricane poses a significant disruption to oil producers in the Gulf of Mexico, which are exposed to the full force of any storm entering the region. The Atlantic hurricane season stretches from June 1st through November 30th. According to U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Climate Prediction Center, the country should expect an above-normal Atlantic hurricane season this year. The outlook expects a 60% chance of an above-normal season, a 30% chance of a near-normal season, and only a 10% chance of a below-normal season. The latest hurricane, named Cristobal, went through the region between June 1st and 11th. At the peak of the hurricane passage, about 30%, or 545,000 barrels per day, of crude oil production and more than 20%, or 601 million cubic feet per day, of natural gas production went offline from late June 5th through June 7th as reported by the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. At the time, operators evacuated working personnel from 65 platforms and rigs in the Gulf, which makes up approximately 10% of the U.S. Gulf's total platforms. The 2017 hurricane season saw Gulf of Mexico oil and gas production impacted by Hurricane Harvey in August and Hurricane Nate in October. The two hurricanes represented the first major disruptions to upstream operations in the region since Hurricane Isaac in 2012. Hurricane Harvey was a Category 4 storm that took out 3 million barrels of crude oil production and 6.6 billion cubic feet of natural gas production in August. Later that year, Hurricane Nate, which was a Category 1 storm, took out 8.4 million barrels of oil production and 11.8 billion cubic feet of natural gas output in October. Even though Nate was a smaller hurricane, its trajectory made the hurricane more disruptive to Gulf of Mexico production compared to Harvey. Nearly a decade earlier, in 2005, Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, and in 2008, Hurricanes Ike and Gustav had more significant impacts on upstream operations in the Gulf. These cases show how operators in the Gulf may often have to deal with hurricanes and associated issues. If the hurricane threat is high, all manpower except essential personnel will be flown onshore to relative safety, and in many cases, this results in wells being shut in for safety reasons. With any action as significant as shutting in a well, there are steps which have to be taken to safely carry this out. A depressurization of the near wellhead area must take place, and this can cause hydrate formation in the wellhead, jumpers or pipeline as the temperature and pressure drops. This is a serious event which can take weeks to resolve. To prevent this from happening, an inhibitor is used. Most commonly methanol, or glycol, is used as thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors. Monoethylene glycol has also been used by operators in the North Sea. Other inhibitors are also used, such as low-dosage hydrate inhibitors, and many of these have a methanol or isopropyl alcohol carrier. Meanwhile, methanol may remain in the oil phase after operations are started. This seminar will focus on the sources of methanol and monoethylene glycol contamination in crude oil. Issues caused by contamination for the refinery setting and for vendors will be covered. Detection and mitigation strategies will also be discussed. We will present 3 case studies from Amica, 1 in the Gulf of Mexico and 2 in the North Sea. This webinar will take advantage of experiences gained from North Sea events to help operators deal with well shut-ins because of hurricanes in the U.S. Methanol contamination may result in reduced value and increased costs. These financial impairments may come in the form of waiver fees, delays, and deferments. In addition, an installation with a history of selling crude with methanol contamination may find it increasingly difficult to sell volumes to customers. Methanol is considered a contaminant in the refinery. One major issue with refinery contamination is the poisoning of catalysts. As a result, crude oil is fed through a desalter in order to remove methanol and other water-soluble contaminants. The wastewater from the desalter is then treated with microbes. However, excess methanol content may kill the microbes used in the water treatment process, which will pose an environmental hazard when the wastewater is released. In addition, methanol contamination in crude lowers the crude cloud point or wax appearance temperature. Operators have ways of abating the effect of methanol contamination. First, they can wash the methanol out of the crude before it leaves the installation, which requires offshore installation of the wash plant and checking of crude. Secondly, operators can quarantine contaminated crude and dose into clean crude, keeping the level under the limit, which requires sufficient storage for crude production volumes. In addition, another option may be diluting in crude from other installations that mingle with the contaminated crude, which is not always possible. Finally, operators can dilute in cargo tanks when the floating production storage and offloading units offload to cargo vessels, which requires proper management of levels. There are many reasons why monitoring methanol content in crude is important. Monitoring levels of methanol gives both the operator and the refinery, pipeline owner, and terminal confidence in the levels of methanol in the crude. Having this knowledge means there is more flexibility with incoming refinery crude, and upstream operators will have the confidence to report levels of methanol without incurring penalties. Both of these give significant commercial benefits. There are ways to monitor methanol content accurately on an offshore oil installation. Gas chromatography is the most recognized method. However, the capital and operating expenditures required to run such technically advanced equipment offshore is very high, and many operators send samples onshore for analysis in labs using gas chromatography. As time is of the essence, sending hazardous samples onshore with delays in shipping and processing before they can be tested in a commercial lab is not optimal. Methanol levels are required in near real time in order to mitigate issues at the moment. Amica is a portable, accurate, robust, simple-to-use colorimetric test, which can give on-site results within the hour, and at an accuracy of ±2% at 50 parts per million. Amica also offers far cheaper capital and operational expenditures than gas chromatography for operators and terminals to analyze portions of crude oil and manage crude content. The following case history illustrates how useful Amica can be in reducing penalties and confirming permits for methanol are not exceeded. The first case history involves a pipeline operator in the Gulf of Mexico, while 2 separate case histories from the North Sea will also be presented. An operator in the Gulf of Mexico pigging a mothballed pipeline containing oil, water and methanol had been given a 4-day permit to manage the methanol levels in the produced oil to below 50 parts per million. Failure to carry this out within the required time scale would result in penalties at significant cost. As a result, the operator needed to monitor methanol levels throughout the day so that informed management decisions could be made. Therefore, it was not practical to wait for test results from an onshore lab, and the operator needed a way to test on-site. The operator chose to use Amica. It is an on-site test, which can be carried out using limited space and skill, and allows results to be gained on site within the hour, allowing the operator to make informed crude management decisions. The asset has a production rate of 40,000 barrels of oil per day, and only 500 barrels of water, so there was limited produced water available to wash the methanol from the crude. A limited amount of additional vessel water was added to this, to help bring the levels down quicker, but the operator needed to be sure they were making the most effective use of this capability. Testing of samples was carried out at regular intervals, and initially showed methanol levels in the crude to be over 1,000 parts per million. These were seen to drop over the 4-day period of the permit, and a significant number of samples had been confirmed below 50 parts per million, within the time limit of the permit. For the operator, it was very important that it could be confirmed this quickly that production was back within their permit limits before their time limit ran out to avoid paying additional fines. The results from testing can be seen here. Using Omeka allowed the operator to monitor the methanol levels at the lease automatic custody transfer separator and make decisions before the crude was exported. This meant that they could trend the concentration of the methanol as it decreased over time and confirm the point at which production fell below 50 parts per million. This gave the operator confidence in informing the refinery of the amount of methanol in the cargo, and could also confirm that the permit had not been exceeded, saving on potential penalties. Note: lease automatic custody transfer means automatic gauging, sampling and shipping of oil from the lease storage tank farm to pipelines. An international operator with an installation in the North Sea felt they were paying excessive waiver fees to export crude oil into the Forties pipeline system, following the use of methanol when wells were restarted through maintenance and other issues. In addition, the previously agreed partitioning with the Forties pipeline system was considered high and commercially costly. As a result, the client wanted to establish the actual current partitioning of methanol to the crude oil prior to its export from the installation. In order for this to be achieved, a fast, on-site test method which could accurately assess levels of methanol was required. However, the traditional process of gas chromatography will involve sending samples onshore for laboratory testing, and would take weeks to obtain results. The operator opted to carry out Omeka tests on both oil and water samples regularly during startup, to establish the relevant partitioning to each phase. Partitioning to the gas phase was also calculated. This showed that partitioning to the oil phase is significantly lower than expected, possibly due to changing conditions over time. The results from Omeka were used to demonstrate the current that actual amount of methanol in crude oil, to the pipeline owner, was lower than the historically agreed value. Afterwards, both the operator and the pipeline owner used the results from Omeka to agree to a new partitioning for methanol in crude from that installation. As a result, the operator was able to save $1 million every year in waiver fees. A newly commissioned oil installation in the North Sea uses continuous injection of monoethylene glycol to prevent hydrate formation in flow lines. In initial operations, there can be a higher than normal loss of monoethylene glycol into the crude oil stream, prior to achieving stability in the monoethylene glycol regeneration unit, with resultant increase in costs to replace the monoethylene glycol. As monoethylene glycol is considered a crude contaminant, it can lead to unwillingness of the refinery to accept cargo shipments containing excessive levels of monoethylene glycol. The refinery may also impose a waiver fee due to monoethylene glycol contamination. Equinor's Mongstad refinery received such a shipment of cargo crude. This shows that prompt analysis of monoethylene glycol content in crude oil to be processed at the refinery was essential. Results from this analysis allowed informed decisions to be made regarding potential additional washing and processing of the contaminated cargo crude. Use of gas chromatography for measuring monoethylene glycol in oil analysis is widely recognized. However, in this instance, it was not practical to analyze the samples using gas chromatography in the short time frame given. In addition to this, multiple samples were to be tested, and Omeka was found more suitable than gas chromatography. Following the creation of a standard curve using the Omeka kit reagents, samples of oil from the cargo tankers were received and analyzed using Omeka oil analysis kits. Samples were also sent to an external lab for correlation with a gas chromatography method of analysis. Testing was carried out over a number of weeks and results were correlated as can be seen in Figure 1. As can be seen from the graph, Amica and gas chromatography results correlate very well. Less than a 20% difference in results were found between the two methods. The successful outcome of this correlation testing meant that Equinor Mongstad continued to use Amica at the refinery laboratory to analyze for monoethylene glycol in oil samples from suspect cargo crude shipments. The successful outcome of this correlation testing meant that Equinor Mongstad continued to use Amica at the refinery laboratory to analyze for monoethylene glycol in oil samples from suspect cargo crude shipments. The importance of having up-to-date information on levels of contaminants, such as methanol in crude oil, cannot be underestimated, as the commercial cost of penalties, reduced revenue or refusal are significant. In today's climate, these are costs which will not go unnoticed, but can be managed and in many cases avoided, by some simple testing upstream. Giving both operators, pipeline owners and refineries confidence and flexibility when processing opportunity crudes. Refiners should not let the hurricane season cause more issues than it already presented, resulting in the legacy of contaminated crudes and their costs. Instead, they should test crude samples to obtain information upstream and ensure best revenue, cost savings and flexibility. Amica was developed specifically for the oil and gas industry, as a way of allowing an on-site, accurate, portable, simple analysis for monoethylene glycol and methanol in oil and water. It has been successfully used for over 5 years by many global operators including Chevron, Oxy, Shell, ExxonMobil, Impex, Eni in a wide range of geographical areas such as the Gulf of Mexico, North Sea, West Africa, the Middle East, Australia, the Mediterranean, and Alaska. Many of whom are regular purchasers and continue to experience the benefits of Amica testing. At Amica, we specialize in offering the benefits and cost savings of using a simple colorimetric test, prompt response to client inquiries, fast product delivery, and an after-sales service with local representation in the USA. Thank you for watching our video. Please send any feedback to info@opportunitycrudes.com.